My name is Erica Jones, and you are watching the Archetypal News Network. I'm a counseling astrologer and a practitioner of the mystical arts and metaphysical healing. You'll find my work at reorimaginal.com. And I'm excited to either remind you or announce a 5-class series called Inhabiting the Heart of the Moon. It starts soon on May 7th, and we will be focusing on the planetary archetype as well as the spirit of the moon, cultivating a conscious doorway into the livingness of the anima mundi, or the soul of the world. We'll be focusing on the archetype of the moon, but experiencing it and studying it and being with it or her in many different ways. Again, that starts on May 7th. Check out my website, reorimaginal.com, for all the classes and events, including a webinar I'm giving on May 15th for the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction that's coming in. So check that out, and I'd love to see you there. So today, I'm your host for a discussion of the full moon in Scorpio on May 5th, 2023, and the moon will reach its maximum fullness at 10:34 a.m. U.S. Pacific time, and it's a partial lunar eclipse that will move over most of Europe and Africa and Asia and all of Australia and India. And the astrological symbolism refers to sort of an upwelling of emotional tangles, can bring a lot of difficult emotions and turbulence around the completion or culmination of projects or relationships. And there, with the Scorpio sort of intensity piled on, moon in Scorpio really doesn't need an eclipse to call forth our depths, what's hiding there, what's really going on beneath the surface. And there's also the kind of an additional chaotic valence coming in through Uranus's involvement, because Uranus has formed a conjunction with the Sun for this eclipse that will perfect later, a few days later. So things that we might expect with Uranus, surprise, the unexpected, and also playing a big influence on the current Mercury retrograde period that we're in. So unveilings could be happening throughout this period, and that might correlate to feelings of betrayal or mistrust, and really pull us to be vulnerable, maybe even to the limits of our ability to be vulnerable. This is just going to be a part of the most of May, and particularly since this is the next to last eclipse on the Taurus-Scorpio axis. And this actually a series that began in November 2021. It tends to already highlight issues of power versus vulnerability, mistrust or trust versus intimacy, stability versus transformation, and other concerns that we see with Taurus and Scorpio. So I would say, as a general statement, a reorganization of power seems to be indicated by the eclipse of the Scorpio full moon, and this is actually in service of life. If the 15th century mystic Nicholas of Cusa is correct, that the infinite nature of the cosmos means that its center is everywhere and its circumference is nowhere. Again, if the cosmos is a place where the center of it is everywhere and the circumference is nowhere, then finding a greater congruence with our own souls could be a really wonderful gift that comes out of this eclipse season. And it's a gift that can then ripple out. That circumference is nowhere. We ground into our center and find that, and it becomes a gift that really ripples out to touch everything we love and feel called to serve and protect. So to explain more about how I'm seeing that, the nature of our love and our service to life, and how we weave harmony into our portion of the dream of the earth, is really in conversation right now between Venus and Neptune. So shortly before the Scorpio lunar eclipse, Venus, who is like the queen of reciprocity, so focused on relationships and exchange of energies, she's made a hard square aspect with the source of divine unity, which is Neptune, and that was exact on May 3rd. So Venus square Neptune, this could be the genuine experience of disappointment in one's love affairs, in your friendships, or money matters, because that's Venus. Neptune would be the disappointment. Something has fallen short of expectations or ideals. But, you know, and the eclipse actually forcing us to face some harsh reality that we just haven't been able to see. On the other hand, Venus square Neptune could also represent getting caught up in an illusion. So rather than the disillusionment, kind of getting caught up in an illusion about love or friends or money and other Venusian topics, whether that image is desirable or objectionable. So the main point with Neptune when it comes to confusions isn't whether the perception is good or bad, if we like it or not. It's just that it's not real. We're not seeing the truth. So I think that under this influence and thinking of the activity of the eclipse, it's important to really sustain a gaze into our hearts long enough to not only see through an illusion, but to see through any subsequent disillusionment and make contact with reality. Because Venus-Neptune has this really slippery way of replacing one illusion with another. And sometimes even seeking out comfort from a sense of victimhood, or mistaking the bitter taste of disillusionment for reality. So the trick is to just keep looking and looking and looking for what is really real, as layers may come forth over really the next few months for some, in some instances, or pretty rapidly over the next few weeks. It just really depends on the circumstance of the individual involved. Now, it's fortunate that Venus is going to be moving into the sign of Cancer on May 7th. She's there until June 5th. And her harmonizing powers just move with greater ease. And she's also will be less under the influence of that Mercury retrograde we're still in. And we might have to deal with some of Cancer's tendency to sentimentality that can cloud the mind. But Venus is making a very sweet trine aspect to Saturn, who's the planet of boundaries. That's exact on May 13th. And Venus trine Saturn suggests that clarity can come with that patient attendance I was talking about, attending to the heart, attending to its wisdom, sticking with that inquiry of what's really going on here. What are my feelings really pointing to? So, boundaries connect us, and Saturn is all about boundaries. And I say boundaries connect us. They aren't just what separate us. And working with that reality of how boundaries create interconnection can correlate to a great deal of emotional and heart healing for the month of May. And it's a good idea because we've got Venus retrograde coming up, and moving through with a bit of patience about what's going on could really benefit all of us going forward into Venus retrograde, when vulnerabilities are going to be again pulled up to the surface with respect to our friends, our love, what we do love and want to love and give love to and receive love from. It's so much about belonging. Now, another influence right now that's making things a little erratic and maybe hard to stick with that patient observance or attendance is Sun conjoining Uranus. And I mentioned that earlier. And there's such a focus on like power and vulnerability with the Scorpio full moon. We might actually really gain a renewed appreciation of the power and the complexity that boundaries generate. Uranus does like to set boundaries. The heroic trajectory of the Sun, of putting oneself out there, is hooking up with the lone hero of Uranus. That's exact May 9th. And Uranus can amplify this turbulent or chaotic feeling of an eclipse, or of what, full moons also bringing emotions to the surface that can be challenging. It also has the benefit of reminding us of the sovereign self, of the experience of being one of those infinite numbers of centers around which cosmic meaning constellates, and how we radiate from our center. And this is very much the symbolism of the Sun, the radiating of our personality, of ourself, of our love into the world. It really impacts how we radiate impacts the way that our circumference extends out to touch and be touched by others. And boundaries interacting. This is what produces such a spectacular diversity of life's expressions, that interaction of boundaries. And I think especially for people who are wrestling with codependent tendencies, this month is offering a chance to not only see which boundaries or lack of boundaries are no longer serving life, but to make a change for the better. Uranus does correlate to making sudden dramatic change. And feeling that as a part of our personality or a drive or something that we have to do, or others that we're entangled with, maybe in not the best ways. This is a part of what a gift that can come from this time, honestly. But Uranus's influence is suggesting a boundary reset, an identity reset. It's the sun. It's how we see ourselves and want to be seen. And also like the arising of the courage to begin to reorganize the way that power flows through our lives and through our relationships. It doesn't need to be a confrontational process. And if we're feeling like we want to rage and thrash about with sort of half-baked ideas or understandings, is probably not the best response to conflict that may arise at this time. But, if we've been avoiding talking about something, if there is a discussion we've been putting off, a healthy choice might be to really let it all hang out and to go back to that, that place of vulnerability that I was mentioning earlier, to be vulnerable in this way and say what it is that you need, air out the wounding and share, how we've been hurting. And it's really that our wounds are like repressed desires or needs, just maybe asking for expression and exposure to be known in order to heal, to truly heal, and allow new boundaries and new bonds to take shape. So, Jupiter is entering Taurus soon. Jupiter will be making a square to Pluto. And we have an ally in this sort of movement. Jupiter really knows how to create larger wholes out of the disparate pieces. And he enters the sign of Taurus, which is so fertile and so fecund. And he enters that on May 16th. And, it's the transition to sort of a calm following the storm of the eclipse energy. And it could really help us with any quest for greater congruence with soul and finding that new relationship with the center of our being. Jupiter in Taurus really is a signification of the good earth, of a bountiful harvest and all of nature's riches. And whether we're recovering from a rough eclipse season or just looking for sensual pleasure and connection, Jupiter being in Taurus is just rewarding our attempts to connect with that greater than human world and to build earth community. Anybody who's looking to initiate or deepen relationships with plants, animals, minerals, discover, how can we collaborate together, is going to find this particular influence, which will last a year from May 2023, May 16th, until May 2024. This is going to be such a supportive time for building or deepening those relationships. So I think the last thing I'll mention is Mercury's retrograde. So Mercury stationed retrograde at 15 degrees of Taurus, April 21st. Mercury will station direct at 5 degrees of Taurus on May 14th. And we'd expect some lingering effects through until the end of May. But this sort of points to more of the obscuration quality of the eclipse, because the importance of events around the time of the eclipse are sometimes concealed. It's, like that symbology of obscured light. It's not immediately obvious. So stuff that goes down right now, we might not really understand just how significant it is until 6 or 12 months have sort of played out. For others, it's going to be like, bam, okay, this got my attention, or this is significant. And so, while we're revisioning and reorganizing how power flows through our lives and relations, Mercury's retrograde really also sort of emphasizes turning patiently towards the heart's wisdom. Patience can be short supply right now, I get it, but that practice of coming back to, with curiosity, what's actually happening, and letting go of total control, the idea that you have total control, allowing oneself to really surrender to whatever truths are emerging into greater awareness, even if the truth is this is just messy, right? Maybe that's the clarity that needs to come, like, because it can be a really tricky way of trying to gain control over a situation that needs a bit of chaos by saying, I know exactly what's going on here, and then sort of creating more complication where it's already like just being with what's happening is the wise move, or what will allow things to shift into a more healthy dynamic or towards something that is in service of life. So I think that those who've been resisting a necessary change or evolution are going to be experiencing kind of a piling on. So now's the opportunity to really see what needs to shift fundamentally deeper, instead of getting caught up too much in what someone else is doing, or the codependent tendency, thinking that one's life is absolutely predicated on the moves or the thoughts or the beliefs of others in some absolute way. There's that interaction of centers that might be more healthy at this time. So thank you for tuning in to the Archetypal News Network and for listening to this full moon report. I hope you find this useful. Again, I'm Erica Jones, and you'll find my work, including classes and events, at realimaginal.com, with best wishes for your well-being in all the ways.